Hello, and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast podcast, your serving of drinks culture and the people who drive it. I'm JC Tops. This week, we're highlighting the amazing world of Portuguese wine. What regions and wines are we familiar with from Portugal outside of port, the fortified wine produced in the Douro Valley? Well, if I'm being honest, I'd have to admit I'm not too familiar with wines from Portugal. So I'm super excited that author and wine enthusiast Spanish wine reviewer Mike DeSimone sat down with John Sumners to discuss one of the oldest wine-producing countries in the world. John is a freelance wine writer and California and Portugal wine specialist based in Lisbon. He is also the author of There's More Than Port in Portugal, the Unpretentious Guide to Portuguese Wine. So listen on as John shares what career he had before wine writing, the famed sommelier who inadvertently helped him decide to leave that career, why he decided to move to Portugal, his favorite regions for Portuguese dry red wines, and his favorite out-of-the-box food pairings. Every glass of wine tells a story. These stories reveal hidden histories, flavors, and passions, and sometimes they unravel our darkest desires. In Wine Enthusiast's newest podcast, Vinfamous, journalist Ashley Smith dissects the underbelly of the wine world. We hear from the people who know what it means when the products of love and care become the source of greed, arson, and even murder. Each episode takes listeners into the mysterious and historic world of winemaking and the crimes that have since become vinfamous. This podcast pairs well with wine lovers, history nerds, and crime junkies alike. So, grab a glass of your favorite wine and follow the podcast to join us as we delve into the twists and turns behind the all-time most shocking wine crimes. Follow Vinfamous on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and be sure to follow the show so you never miss a scandal. New episodes drop every other Wednesday.
Hi, this is Mike DeSimone. I am a writer at large for Wine Enthusiast magazine. I cover the Spanish beat, and today I am talking to John Sumners, who is a wine expert who wrote a book called There's More Than Port in Portugal, the Unpretentious Guide to Portuguese Wine. John is a wine industry veteran, writer, educator, consultant, and a Portuguese and California wine specialist based in Lisbon, Portugal. His roles have ranged from working the floor in the Manhattan fine dining battlefield, managing, buying, and marketing for San Francisco wine retailers, and serving as a featured contributor for various international publications. Well, various international publications. That sounds really, really important. Hey, John, welcome. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
I mean, I cover Spain for Wine Enthusiast.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you live at least part time, it seems, in Portugal, and that you're a Portuguese wine expert. But I know that both Spain and Portugal are expat hotspots.
Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah, they really are. And I guess there's both countries obviously have the pros, cons, reasons to be there, reasons to avoid, et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of, I think it'd be interesting offline to just kind of talk about our experiences in both countries. However, staying on topic,
yes, sir.
Tell me, how did you get into wine? We look at your bio and you're a wine expert, you're specializing in a couple of different things. What brought you to wine?
It was really kind of organic and just a natural beginning. Me and a buddy of mine, a guy by the name of Jeremy Bran, he's not in the business, but he and I used to explore and obsess over whiskey. That was the initial gateway. And he lives in Lexington, Kentucky. So, he's got access to all kinds of crazy bourbon. And then that kind of segued into wine for me because I love a complex subject. And I was just constantly fascinated and wanted to know more. Like there was so much out there to learn.
Okay, and I know that. So you have. I know. Besides this, the blurb on your book, I took a look at your bio, and it says that at one point you worked under a superstar sommelier winemaker, working at a restaurant in Midtown Manhattan, while you were pursuing a career in opera. Can you tell us the name of the restaurant and who was that superstar som?
Yes, that restaurant was, and I believe it's still there. It's called the Red Eye, right across from Carnegie Hall.
Oh, okay, yeah, Red Eye Grill, the home of the dancing shrimp.
That is correct. Home to the dancing shrimp. Yeah, it's big palatial place, kind of upscale brasserie, moving at a million miles an hour.
And so, and who was it? Who was the super? Come on, that's only half the question.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, Andre Mack had just left per se, and he was hired. I mean, they must have paid him a mint because he's a rock star.
Right.
But he came over to what's called the Fireman Hospitality Group, which owns about 5 different restaurants in Midtown, and came in to revamp the wine program. And so I see him coming in, and I'm already really into wine. I'm every night I got my head stuck in the World Atlas of Wine. Jancis Robinson's a hero of mine,
Mhm.
and I see him coming in, and I think, well, hot damn, I am going to learn everything I can from this guy. And so I just absolutely tortured him with questions.
So, and was he cool about it?
Very, very down to earth, kind, generous with his time. I mean, I thought I was at the beginning of getting to know, a few of the intricacies of the business, but I didn't really know anything compared to him. And he spent all the time I wanted, just answering questions, giving me advice, things of that nature. And he was just delightful. And he wasn't there a very long time. I mean, gosh, I guess maybe give or take a year.
Okay.
But it was a really formative moment. And it was that at that moment that in the back of my head, I was like, you know what? I'm going to transition out of opera and I'm going to transition into the wine industry.
Wow. Okay, that's real. That's really cool. So, just curious. Did you have success as an opera singer?
Yeah, moderately. I mean, the fact that I had this gig in between gigs, that in and of itself tells you, well, I wasn't a superstar.
Right.
But I had plenty of gigs, and I had a great deal worked out with a very generous GM there. And as soon as I'd get a contract, I'd just let him know when the contract was and for the duration. And he'd let me go do my gig wherever it was. And I'd come back, 2 or 3 months later and come right back into my position of seniority. It was a pretty sweet deal.
Cool. That's great. You're lucky. And I know, living in New York City and an awful lot of my friends are actors and are singers. And, having that situation where you can be flexible and you can actually simultaneously build 2 careers is that really, really is being in a wonderful place. And you're very lucky to have had that situation. And then I know that, so at some point you left New York and you were working in California at the Napa Valley Wine Exchange. So how did you get, other than the wise ass response, I took an airplane or I drove everything? How did you get from New York to California and start working as the California Portugal expert at Napa Valley Wine Exchange?
Well, I took a road trip across the country, stopped all over the West, all the great sites, went to Yellowstone, Black Hills, Badlands, Tetons, all that amazing stuff. And took some time to do that, a few weeks, and then landed in San Francisco. And very, very shortly after, was hired as the GM of Napa Valley Winery Exchange. Now that place is it's still there, and it's a renowned little boutique that specializes almost exclusively in small producers of California. And there's a gentleman there by the name of Don Gillette that is, yeah, he's not widely known, but if you're in the California wine industry and you're a small producer or you work in California retail, you know this guy. He is a local legend, and you can still walk in there and ask to talk to Don, and he'll regale you with unbelievable amounts of California wine history for an hour.
Okay, and they had Portuguese wines that they sold there as well?
No, actually, no. After several years working there, I mean, gosh, I guess I was there about 6, 7 years, I think, working with Don, and then moved on to K&L Wine Merchants.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, and started working with the Spain Portugal buyer there, Kirk
Okay.
Walker. Was paired up with him,
Yeah.
and Kirk is, don't get me wrong, his Portuguese knowledge is phenomenal. He's brilliant, but his home turf, his real passion is Spain. And I thought, well, I'll be the Portugal guy. And I just dove in and started obsessively learning everything I could and tasting everything I could when it came to Portugal.
So what's your connection with Portugal? You live in Lisbon now, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So COVID hit and turned everything upside down for everyone. And my partner and I, Catherine, we had visited Portugal previously and spent a couple weeks just traveling around the country, went to several different places, and we're just head over heels in love with it. And we thought, if we ever go expat, this is where we're going.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that came to fruition. We decided, well, let's do it, and took the leap and arrived in Portugal in I think it was October of 2020, and continued my obsessive study. And now that I had boots on the ground, I had access to everything. So just tasting everything, talking to winemakers, talking to revered retailers, and just truly absorbing anything I could.
So you got there. I'm just trying to think. So you actually got there. Obviously, if you got there in October of 2020, you
Mhm.
got there the minute they opened the country to foreigners.
That's it. We were actually supposed to get there earlier,
Right.
but our visas were stuck in limbo. So we actually we we decided, well, what are we going to do? And so we were kind of, quote, stuck in the Highlands of Scotland for a few months, which was not too shabby because everyone was very respectful and keeping distance, wearing masks. And we were able to just explore the beauty of Scotland for a few months while we waited for our visas to be officially approved.
Right. Yeah, that's not a terrible place to be, especially considering,
Not bad.
I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were stuck in New York City, which was just a frightening thing, and living in a very big apartment building, and to go anywhere, to get groceries, just to move your body and go for a walk, you had to get into an elevator with other people and pass
Yeah.
other people. So I think you were very blessed and lucky. But so then, I mean, so you wound up in Portugal, you were there for a couple of years, obviously in your previous jobs, you really had, especially at K&L, it sounds like you really had delved into Portugal. And now let's fast forward, and you've written this book. There's more
Yes.
important Portugal. What made you decide to write your book?
So in the process of my education of learning and teaching myself about Portuguese wine, I kept thinking, you know what, I wish there was a kind of comprehensive but to the point reference guide that I could use as a touchstone throughout this journey. And I wanted something that kind of encapsulated the entirety of the Portuguese wine world, but did it in a kind of concise and unfussy way. And nothing like that existed. Now, there are other great books written about Portuguese wine, and they're very, very comprehensive. And there are other books that, just touch on a few things and do a nice job with that. But I wanted the combination of comprehensive, but also very to the point and also relatable. And nothing existed. And I kept talking about it. And finally, Catherine was apparently fed up with me because she said, you need to stop talking and start writing.
Wow. And that's what we all need in our lives. And I do love, well, you're right when you say relatable. I know, and I'm just if I start flipping through here to find something, we'll have moments of silence, which no one will really enjoy at all. But there's like some really funny little like zingers and one-liners, and you do keep it. There's a lot of it's a small but mighty book.
I appreciate that.
There's a lot of information in there, but I know that there's also, when you're writing a book, there's a lot of decision making that has to be made. So
Oh, yeah.
how did you decide, like, why did you say, like, let me lay it out, let me divide it into like 3 distinct sections: bubbly, still dry, and fortified sweet?
Well, in general, when writing this, if I'm writing for a publication, you kind of have to stay in the lines of the kind of generalized voice and generalized rules that publication wants. You gotta obey the editor. And with this, I could do it how I wanted to do it. And I could write with my voice and how my brain understands things. And my brain looks at things, and I the way I understand wine is different categories of styles. And so I thought that's the way I want to break it down, because it's very simple for me to understand it that way.
Yeah, you know what and that makes a lot of sense because I mean a lot of wine books are written geographically, and as an author myself, as the co-author of 6 books, and the most recent one is called White Wine. Kind of like the question that everybody always asks is like, why did you decide to write about grapes? And it's like, because everybody else writes about regions. You look at
Yep.
every other major wine book, whether it's the Wine Bible, the World Atlas of Wine, and I could go on, they all are written geographically.
Mhm.
And we decided to take 50 grapes or regional blend styles and write about them individually. And of course you have to talk about where they come from, but not just to break it out by country, but to break it out by grape. So I love that you kind of said, I want to do this in the way that makes sense for me. Talking about bubbly, I was in Barreada last year for the first time, and I hope
Yeah.
I pronounced that right. And it's actually shocking to people when I say, yeah, I was judging a sparkling wine competition in Portugal, and people they're always surprised, like they make sparkling wine in Portugal.
Yes, they make brilliant sparkling wine in Portugal. My gosh. And you're talking about a country that consumes more seafood per capita than any other country in Europe. Of course, there's great sparkling wine. Bairrada it's a special place. I mean, it's traditional method. You're dealing with indigenous varieties, and because it's right there on the coast, it has something that Champagne doesn't have. Is that coastal, that salty, minerally coastal influence that comes in, and it has the chalky soils, it has the sandy soils, but really it's the ocean that kind of sets the tone of these wines and adds that salty spice to the finish of them.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, it was amazing to be there. The funny thing is, I was there judging a wine competition. And so basically, we were tasting wine all morning. And then the afternoons, we would do winery visits. And I didn't even realize until we left that we were anywhere near the coast. There was nobody I said, hey, let's go to the beach. But
Oh my
we were
gosh.
there.
Yeah, you're probably like, maybe like a 10-minute drive or something.
Exactly. So if there is, so look, if someone picks up your book, right, and there's only one region, if readers take away only one region from your book that they want to explore in depth, maybe visit, what region would you hope it would be?
Oh man, you're really putting me in a spot here, Mike. You're asking me to pick like my favorite pet.
Okay, let's go to either American or British readers who, although there's a lot of great wines from Portugal, there's a somewhat limited supply of the regions that do get exported. So let's just say for someone in, an English speaker in the US or the UK, thinking about what wines get heavily exported, what region would you hope people would explore?
That they can get. Okay, yeah, I see. I think Douro is wonderful, but it's kind of the marquee. It's the Napa, so to speak.
Mhm.
So more and more, you're starting to, speaking of Bairrada, you're starting to see more and more Bairrada out there. And I think people should check this wine out because, you think of the Iberian Peninsula, you think of wines that are, especially the red wines, you think of ripe, big, powerful wines. But Portugal, I mean, it's a sliver of land along the coast. It's a relatively cool country for where it is longitudinally or latitude. I don't
Right.
know. One of those two in Europe.
Geographically.
So, yeah. Let's call it that. So in Bairrada, you have several different grapes, but you've really got the marquee grape there. The king is Baga, Baga, and Baga is a really versatile grape, but if you vinify it in a classical red wine form, it comes across as somewhere between Nebbiolo, like your Barolo or Barbaresco, and Pinot Noir. It has that kind of bright ripping acidity and gripping tannin, but it has a little more soft fruit around that structure. It can kind of to the more Pinot Noir end of the spectrum. So it's a little more, slightly more cuddly in its youth. I think they're fascinating wines. They age forever, and they're also incredible food wines. So find some Bairrada, Bairrada. You'll start seeing them more and more.
Okay, that's good to know. So speaking of, you actually mentioned the Douro Valley, which is home of the famous port wines, and now, of course, this is not something brand new, but for quite some time now, we're seeing a lot more dry wines coming out of that region.
Mhm.
How did that come about? When did producers start turning from making all port to making dry wines as well?
Well, there's always kind of a tiny underground trickle of dry wines that were made there, but not in any real commercial volume. What really put it on the map is it's a specific vintage of a specific wine was the 1952 Barca Velha, and it's since become a cult wine. It's one of Portugal's most expensive wines, and they only make it in the very best vintages. But in 1952, this dry red wine from Douro was tremendously received. And that kind of set the precedent, and it made people realize, oh, Douro can make really great red wine too, like dry table
Right.
wine. So more and more producers started doing that, and now it's a good mix between port and dry red wines. I mean, more of the dry red wines tend to be produced a little further to the east in Douro Superior, but you still see quite a few made in the middle region, the Cima Corgu, and even in the lower region. So it's really, and it's continuing to grow because fortified sweet wines are currently out of fashion.
Hmm. Yeah, that is. I just think, unfortunately, worldwide, we're seeing that. Although there are people in the market who love their sweet wine, but there's a lot less port is being drunk. So you've got in the Douro Valley, as you just said, people are making more dry wine, and because there's less Sauterne being drunk, we're seeing a lot more high quality white Bordeaux. We're also seeing a lot more in Hungary from Tokai because people are not drinking those sweet wines in the quantities that they used to. We're seeing a lot more dry Furmen.
Mhm.
You feel, as you just said, a lot of it is just kind of winemaking necessity, but it also points to the fact that they've just got this incredible terroir, these beautiful, old vine vineyards. They've got the know-how, and there's no reason not to make incredible red wines. And now we're going to switch to another region, Vino Verde. It straddles two sections in your book, bubbly and dry. I feel like Vino Verde is probably one of the categories of Portuguese wines that people in the States have access to and know about and have
Yeah.
heard of. So if I'm buying a bottle of that, how do I know if it's fizzy or if it's flat?
You know what? That's a great question. And I have a complex answer for you, unfortunately. Um, so, Vinho Verde, it's a region, but it's also been the victim of its own kind of mass market product success. This kind of fun, fizzy, easy, inexpensive style. But there's a whole other side to Vinho Verde, which is still wines that can go. These are aromatic white wines that can go toe to toe with the best that Alsace or Germany or Austria can produce. So yeah, so there is this complication of like, well, what am I getting here? And there's not a perfect answer to it, unfortunately. The best rule of thumb, though, and what you're going to find more often than not, is if the bottle just says Vinho Verde and it doesn't have a varietal labeling on it, a particular grape, or it doesn't have a regional labeling on it, you can bet it's probably the light, fun, fizzy stuff.
Okay.
And if it's got a variety on the label, if it's telling you this is Alvarinho or this is Loureiro or this is Avesso, and additionally, if it has a sub-region on it, then more often than not, that's going to be a more serious, in quotes, serious still wine.
Okay, all right. That's a kind of a good guideline, I think.
Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb.
It sort of reminds me, in a certain way of like Riesling. A lot of people steer completely away from it because
Yes.
they don't know when they buy a Riesling whether it's going to be sweet or dry, so they just stay away from it at all. And I do know that Vino, and I'm going to pronounce it correctly this time, Vino Verde. I've got that, the Spanish pronunciation where there's a vowel there. I'm going to say it.
No, no, trust me, I get it. It took me so long to learn this language.
So, which literally translates to green wine, and people expect this greenish, very young wine. So, what is actually the reality of Vino Verde?
Well,
What do I get when I open a bottle?
well, it's with the fun fizzy stuff that this is great stuff for the beach, for a picnic, for a backyard cookout. But the serious stuff, you're it's really an exploration of these different varieties in Vinho Verde. And even though the name is a little bit confusing because it means literally green wine, but what are they talking about? And there is some mixed information on that. We're not exactly sure. It may have been that it's one of the greenest parts of Portugal. It gets a lot of rain, and so maybe that's it. Everything ripens more slowly there, so the grapes are greener longer, and often they're harvested a little bit earlier. And when they have a little bit more of a green hue to them as opposed to golden. So that's kind of the short answer to that. But Vinho Verde, it's a complex place, and there's a lot of different subregions to it, and it just kind of gets oversimplified into this mass market product. And I think that's going to be a very exciting thing for people to explore as more and more of these serious Vinho Verde bottlings start coming to the export market.
Yeah, and actually in the book, in white wine, I mean, Portugal has an incredibly high number, and you probably like sort of know it, the ballpark off the top of your head of indigenous grapes.
Oh, yeah.
So we covered Alvarinho as a grape, and we covered, Albarino, Alvarinho in one chapter. And then we also covered as a regional style because it can be made as a blend or with different varieties. We covered Vinho Verde as well. So I hate to have paid, short shrift to all of the other great Portuguese grapes, but you did a great job on, giving them love in your book. So we talked a little bit about food and seafood. What are some of your favorite food pairings with the Portuguese wines that you're drinking?
Oh gosh. So I'm just a nut job of a locavore. So I love all the traditional Portuguese things. If you'll humor me, let me ramble off a few dishes that I really like and the pairings thereof. So there's a particular dish that's called the ameijoas a bulho ao pato. Now that's a mouthful. And the last word is very confusing because pato means duck. But this dish has nothing to do with duck.
Okay.
It is essentially just steamed clams. So steamed clams in a pot with white wine, olive oil, butter, garlic, cilantro. And then you eat the clams and then you sop up all that wonderful sauce with bread. And you pair that with an alvarinho from Vinho Verde, from far northern region of Vinho Verde called Monção e Melgaço. That's absolutely brilliant stuff.
You are making me hungry. I think everybody can be salivating right now.
That's the idea, Mike. So another favorite of mine, Catherine and I, we always love to get this. We sometimes make it at home. We sometimes get it out, but it's called the arroz de pato, and it just means duck rice. And it's very simple. It's essentially it's duck paella,
Okay. Oh, wow.
and you pair that with like I said, a red wine from Baixada, or quite frankly, any of the red wines from those regions right along the coast. Whether it's a red Vinho Verde, yes, there is red Vinho Verde,
Wow.
or it's a Baixada red, or it's a red from Lisboa, or it's a red from Setúbal. These all pair brilliantly with this duck rice. Third, I'd probably say one of my favorite things to do is every Thanksgiving we have kind of an expat Thanksgiving here in Lisbon and invite our friends from Berlin to come down. And we do the full Thanksgiving spread, the whole 9 yards. I get my Midwestern classics, and Catherine gets her her Northeastern classics, and we like to pair that with white wine from Alentejo, because it's originally Alentejo. We think of it as a red wine region. It's a hotter region, but historically, traditionally, this is a white wine region,
Mhm.
and the white wines from there are beautiful. They're luscious and opulent, but have all kinds of character to them. They're a lot of fun to play with, and they go tremendously well with a full Thanksgiving spread.
In addition to producing world-class content, did you know that Wine Enthusiast is also the premier shopping destination for wine lifestyle products? Just visit our shop at wineenthusiast.com, where you'll discover an amazing assortment of unique quality items guaranteed to enhance your wine experience. From glassware and wine openers to thousands of unique wine gifts. Imagine a toy store for wine lovers. And don't forget about protecting your wine. We are the nation's leading retailer of wine storage products. Whether you have 6 or 600 bottles, desire a wine cabinet, or a custom-designed wine room, our free wine storage consultations will help you find the perfect fit for your collection. Visit wineenthusiast.com today. We bring wine to life. Sponsored by Wine Enthusiast Shop.
I actually feel like, when we get every November, when we get those articles, all the articles that everyone writes on all the different websites.
Yeah, yeah.
And like what pairs with Thanksgiving. I feel like Alentejo wines. I feel like those are presented a lot. And I have to say, I know that you started out, in your career wanting to be an opera singer, but I have to tell you, the way you've described pairings right now, I think that you were probably an amazing waiter.
Well, that was my favorite part about it. I mean, I think any of us that have worked in a restaurant have like what I jokingly call restaurant PTSD, where you still have like anxiety nightmares about it.
Right.
But the parts of it that I cherished, I mean, besides the camaraderie and kind of being in the trenches with your people, was being at the table with a guest that was really excited to just put their trust in your hands and let you guide them and talk with them and say, well, what do you usually like? Do you want to do something that's more exploratory? Do you want to go with an old faithful, but maybe a different vintage or a different producer of a region that you love? I mean, that was the real joy of it. So, I mean, I don't think necessarily I think maybe I'm good at that simply because I love doing it.
Right. Right. But just when you describe the dishes and why the wine works with it, I was like, wow, this, John could really, if he were my waiter, I would be, or the beverage director at a restaurant I was eating at, I would just be so happy and so excited, and I would take your advice. So for people who don't live in Portugal, for those of us, for example, who live in New York City, and as much as I love to eat at home, it's been kind of hot out and I might be getting some takeout. What are some of your out of the box, non-traditional pairings with Portuguese wines? Just a couple.
Yeah. Do you want something way out there? Because I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
So often, just as a general pairing concept, we don't think of pairing fortified wines or sweet wines with the main meal. We think of those as, okay, it's a dessert wine, or it goes with dessert, or it's an aperitif. It's not something to pair with anything,
Right?
Anything savory. But you look at American cuisine. I mean, we've got General Tso's chicken. I mean, that's an American Chinese classic,
Yes.
and you have that savory, salty chicken with this kind of sweet honey glaze on it. You've got Americana classic pork chops and applesauce.
Mm-hmm.
You've got barbecue. I mean, barbecue. You've got the smoky, savory, meaty, and then you put like a Kansas City style sauce on that, and that's that molasses rich style of sauce. And the way that savory, meaty, salty plays with sweet is great. And pairing a glass of Madeira or a glass of Moscatel de Setúbal or a glass of white port with a pork chop, my goodness, it is divine.
Yeah, those all. Again, you're making me super hungry, but those are all excellent excellent options and choices. Now, you talked a little bit about white port. So we talked in the beginning about Portugal being this super hot expat destination, also vacation destination,
Uh-huh.
especially since now United flies direct from Newark to Oporto, and they also fly direct to Madeira as well. So, but everybody who comes back from Oporto comes back raving about white port. It's made in tiny quantities. It's mostly for domestic consumption, or it's sold into the UK. Do you think that we're going to be seeing more white port in the US market?
You can absolutely count on it. I think this is a category, a style of Portuguese fortified wine that is just about to explode on the international scene. It's made in all kinds of different styles. Even there's kind of your drier style, there's your sweeter style. You have different general age statements like 10, 20, 30 year, made in a tawny style. You have more fruity kind of quote ruby style if it was a red port, and it's tremendously versatile. Some of the more inexpensive bottlings make a great base for a cocktail, like a port and tonic with a squeeze of lime and a sprig of mint, and you're set for a hot day.
I actually love a port and tonic. So
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
it's super hot in New York. I feel like there's a port and tonic in my future today.
In your near future.
Besides port, what are some of the other sweet styles of Portuguese wine? You touched on them in the pairing, but tell me about Setúbal and Madeira.
Yeah, so that's really, those three are really the royal fortified trifecta of Portuguese wine, and Portugal is probably the most prominent country on earth for just those styles of wine in general. And it came about through kind of necessity. It was these wines were fortified and left a little bit sweet, therefore, because they had to travel, they had to be durable, and in the holds of ships going out across the globe. So yeah, you have Madeira, which is a fascinating style. I mean, basically, if you took a tawny port and you very, very slowly cooked it over the course of years, just at kind of a low heat, and this renders it indestructible. And so it became this wonderful beverage for those in hotter climates, like in the Americas, and it became very popular in the U.S. Well, even before it was the U.S.
Right.
Americans were drinking in the 18th century, I think like over 90% of all Madeira. So it takes on these oxidative and kind of cooked nutty flavors, but it always has this beautiful bright acidity to it. And then Moscatel de Setúbal. This is so overlooked. This is magnificent stuff. And basically no one outside of Portugal, or that's into wine in a very serious way, knows about it.
Yeah, I actually was exposed to it as a wine judge. One year I sat on a sweet wine panel.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, how did it sit with you in that experience?
They were just amazing, and it just opened up, my mind and my eyes and my taste buds to this incredible style of wine that even kind of, I'm at the level where I'm judging international wine competitions, and I've never heard of Moscatel de Setúbal.
Right, right. It's wild to me. And I mean, maybe I should keep my mouth shut because because it keeps it inexpensive.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to afford it soon.
I know. What am I doing to myself? But yeah, it's wonderful stuff, and it's mostly made from a variety here called Moscatel Graúdo, which is our old friend in the Mediterranean basin, Muscat of Alexandria.
Mm-hmm.
It made its way everywhere.
And one of the oldest grapes in the world, in fact.
Exactly. So it's like a time machine. I love it. It's a style that's wildly out of fashion right now, but all fashion comes back around eventually. I mean, we were wearing like bell bottoms in the 90s, right? You remember something like that, right?
Right. I don't know. I'm not a tall person, so I don't care how wide pants legs get, I'm wearing my narrow pants. That's it.
Hey, you know what? Me too. I'm about 5'6" on a good day.
Exactly. And on the other hand, though, when it comes to wine, I'm an equal opportunity drinker. I drink dry, I drink sweet, I drink still, I drink bubbly, I drink fortified. So it sounds like I'm going to have to do a lot more exploration of Portuguese wines.
Fantastic.
Sure. So besides Portuguese wines, and I know when you live somewhere for, we have a house in the south of Spain and we can get wines from elsewhere in Europe, but it's not super easy. So besides Portuguese wines, what do you drink?
I mean, it kind of goes with my locavore thinking. When I'm in Portugal, I'm drinking probably 99% Portuguese wine. Although every rare once in a while, there are a couple shops that I don't know how they get them, but they get a couple of small producers from California and Washington. And I've found some bottles of single vineyard Andrew Will from Washington, from Columbia Valley.
Wow.
So that's always kind of a fun treat to take me back to my old stomping grounds of the West Coast in general. And I love, and this is an obsession that didn't start with Northern Rhone. It started with Central Coast, California. I love cool climate Syrah.
Yeah.
So anytime I can get my hands on any kind of that kind of black fruited, but still bright, spicy, peppery, herbal characteristic from a cool climate Syrah, like from Santa Barbara, great producers there like Melville. I am all about it.
Cool. That sounds like it sounds like you've got a broad palate, but you know what you like, which is really what's important when we're drinking wine. So, is there anything that we've missed? Was there something that you were dying to talk about that we didn't hit on?
Well, I think what I'm most passionate about right now is communicating with people who might not feel invited into the wine world. So often it's a complex topic. So it has a somewhat coded language and a proprietary lexicon that we use. And I mean, you and I both understand that there's a reason for that complexity, but it tends to be, when we're reaching out, it tends to be a little bit unhelpful. So like you and Jeff do so brilliantly, instead of standing at the castle gate and saying, in order to get in here, you need to know this, and this. Just like you do, I want to go out and meet the people where they are and say, I understand that you want to get in the castle, but you're scared about it. You're scared away by all the complex lexicon and everything. But let me help you. Let me guide you. Let me walk with you, and let's have a conversation about it. And I think it's so important that we do that, and especially with Portuguese wine. It's so complicated in and of itself because it is its own kind of proprietary thing with its own indigenous varieties. But being more inviting and meeting people where they are, as opposed to being the gatekeepers, I think is important. And I admire you guys for that, and I hope that I'm doing that as well.
Thank you. Absolutely. Just having talked to you today and having read through your book, I really do feel that you are doing exactly what you are stating you set out to do. And I actually love that metaphor of the castle gate. And instead of saying like, you can't come in here, going out and and talking to people. I really do like that a lot. Now, when we just really quick, we're going to go in a moment. But when we were emailing back and forth, setting this up, you actually said I need to be prepared if you're going to ask me about Madonna versus Cindy.
I'm in trouble now, aren't I?
No, we're not going there because let's face it, the people who listen to podcasts are a lot younger.
They probably don't know who those people are.
Britney versus Christina.
Oh my gosh!
Come on, Britney versus Christina. Where are you?
Oh, I'm with whoever's got the pipes. As a former singer, Christina. And to your earlier question, Cindy for the pipes.
There you go. Okay. Agreed on both counts.
There you go.
All right, John Sumners, great talking to you today. I really enjoyed chatting with you about wine in general, about your journey in wine. And I've kind of breezed through it, but I really look forward to getting more of an in-depth look at your amazing book, There's More Than Port in Portugal. So, John, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Mike. It's been an absolute honor.
All right, take care. Bye.
Portugal has been producing wine for millennia, but for some, it doesn't come without its complexities. For us who don't speak the language, the regions and the indigenous grape varieties may seem a little perplexing. Fortunately, for wine lovers, the wine is certainly not. From red ports to white ports, sweet styles to dry, wines from Portugal are dynamic and incredibly food-friendly. So maybe it's time we step off the beaten path and reach for wine outside of port, because Portuguese wines are some of the most approachable and diverse wines in the world. What are your thoughts? If you liked today's episode, we'd love to read your reviews and hear what you think. You can email us your comments and your questions at podcast@wineenthusiast.net. And hey, why not tell your wine-loving friends to check us out too? Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. You can also go to wineenthusiast.com/podcasts for more episodes and transcripts. I'm JC Tubbs. Thanks for listening.